All right, guys, get your fight stance ready. We're going to be talking about the enemies to lovers trope. Come join me. All right, guys, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I am not a big fan of enemies to lovers. That trope, just not my favorite, because maybe it's because I have a hard time writing it. Maybe it's because I am a Southerner who flees conflict. Maybe it's a lot of different reasons, but enemies to lovers has always made me feel uncomfortable. But I thought we could talk about a few books that I did enjoy that show this trope, and some that I'm looking forward to reading that have this trope. And I would love you guys to share some of your favorite recommendations for enemies to lovers, because I do have a goal in mind to write an enemies to lovers book coming soon. So, see, I'm more of a one person is antagonistic, but not both. I like, that's okay with me, right? The one is a fast fall and the other one takes longer. I can handle that. I'm writing one of those right now. And then I of course love Friends to More. It's one of my favorites. I love A Marriage of Convenience, another thing that I really enjoy. But enemies to lovers, I've always had, feeling about it. So let's talk a little bit about a few books that I have read that are enemies to lovers that I absolutely have loved. So one of my first and favorite is I consider a classic, is Elizabeth Peters series. Crocodile on the Sandbank is the first of the Amelia Peabody series. The two of them in this is phenomenal. If I could write it like this, I think I would have a lot of fun. So maybe I can channel some of that. Have you all ever read these? The audiobooks are phenomenal. I've listened to 6 of them, maybe 7 on audiobook, and love the narrator. They on the second book, they had a different narrator who wasn't quite as good as the first narrator, so they switched back to the one who did book 1 in books 3, 4, and on. She was fantastic, but the story is such fun and so clever. And one of the book series I read when I was writing the Freddie and Grace series to get some inspiration for the Cairo Curse book, right? If you've not read it, it is during the early excavations of Egypt, and it becomes the first book is the beginning of a married romance that happens through the rest of the series. So it's very fun. Another book that's a classic that everyone will know, that's enemies to lovers, is Pride and Prejudice, of course. Pride and Prejudice is not my favorite Jane Austen book. Maybe it's because it's the enemies to lovers, but you get that whole we're not friends and vibe from Lizzie and Darcy. So if this is one of your top Jane Austen books, kudos to you. It is so well written. Mrs. Bennet and Mr. Bennet are hilariously fun and a little bit annoying on the Miss Bennet part, but Jane Austen just writes clever. And so that is another one that I really loved for enemies to more, enemies to lovers. Okay, this one is kind of a sort of enemies to lovers, and it goes right along with the Jane Austen vibe because it is Austenland. I adore this. It's very small. It's a short book to read, but such fun and so clever. And of course, I love the movie, but the book is better. But the movie was really fun. And you get to see a bit of that Jane Austen Pride and Prejudice vibe in Austenland. If you're looking for romantic comedy, if you're looking for some clever storyline, just really fun. So one of the books that I enjoy, that's Enemies to More. Lots of the early Mary Keneally books, if you've read Mary Keneally, they have a lot of that Enemies to More vibe. One of my favorites was her very first one, which was Petticoat Ranch. Oh my goodness. I fell in love with this story and this writing style because I was in the early phases of trying to pursue publication when this book came out, and I'd been trying to find something that matched what I wanted to write. Now, I read Siri Mitchell, Kissing Adrian for contemporary, and I read Mary Keneally, Petticoat Ranch for historical, and both of them were like, oh, I want to be able to write similar. This is the kind of stuff I want to write. So when I read Petticoat Ranch, it is so funny. Let me read you a little bit from the back. If you've not read it, it's her debut. Sophie Edwards is doing just fine alone in the bleak wilderness of Texas. Still, God hears the cries for help that she is too busy to voice. One night, a strange yet oddly familiar man rides into her life and insists on rescuing her and her 4 daughters. Can she find a way to love a headstrong mountain man? When Clay McClellan discovers his brother has been murdered, he's bent on finding the killers and seeing them properly hanged. But first, he believes Christian duty demands he marry his sister-in-law. After all, Sophie needs someone to protect her, right? Judd Mason is determined to get his hands on the Edwards Ranch, but that widow woman has gone and gotten herself a new man to protect her. What will it take to get Sophie Edwards out of the way for good? Can Sophie and Clay, so it's a marriage of convenience, can Sophie and Clay, the mismatched newlyweds, work together to protect their land and find love on the Texas frontier? Mary Keneally writes some funny stuff. So if you've not read this one, it's very fun. Really quickly, I just wanted to read the back of Austenland if you've never heard of it. Jane is a New York woman who can never seem to find the right man, perhaps because of her secret obsession with Mr. Darcy, as played by Colin Firth in the BBC adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. But when a wealthy relative bequeaths to her a trip to England, to the English resort catering to Austen-obsessed women, Jane's fantasies of meeting the perfect Regency-era gentleman suddenly become more real than she ever could have imagined. In this total immersion in a fake Austenland enough to make Jane kick the Austen obsession for good? Or could all her dreams actually culminate in a Mr. Darcy of her own? In this addictive, charming, and compassionate story, Shannon Hale brings out the Jane Austen obsessive in all of us. This is Gin Market, just so you know. So is Elizabeth Peters, Gin Market too, just so you guys know who are looking. All right, so another enemies to lovers that I absolutely adore. And it's not really enemies to lovers, but they start off kind of antagonistic toward each other because he's trying to avoid his feelings for her, is Gentleman Jim. I wouldn't say it's enemies to lovers, though. It just starts out with a little antagonism, which is probably why I can handle it better. So you guys, I know, have even better ideas. I do have a few brand new ones that I'm going to be reading, and they're enemies to lovers. So there is Falling for Your Enemy, Emma St. Clair, again, General Market. So I'm not sure how clean it is, but she usually writes pretty clean. So that's definitely an enemies to lover, even in the title. And just out, Brandon and Sebastian Hate Each Other. Definitely enemies to lover by fellow publishing sister Bethany Turner. I've heard great things about this. So 2 enemies to lovers. Let's see if I can handle it, guys. I'll have to tell you after I finish it to see if I could handle the enemies to lovers trope in those books. So I am curious. What are some of your favorite enemies to lovers tropes, and what would you recommend for a person who is slightly uncomfortable with the idea of enemies to lovers tropes? I would love to hear your recommendations and share more when you get a chance. Thanks a bunch. Have a great day.